Hey guys, I'm Christina, and I want to welcome you to the first edition of the Greenwall Kickback. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a pivotal moment in American history. The potential rescheduling of cannabis is our topic for today, and arguably, it's one of the most influential drug policy changes in America in the last 50 years. So let's talk a little bit about the history and how we got to where we are today. For centuries, cannabis has sort of been recognized for its medicinal properties. And that really in America dates back to the early 1800s when it was documented for easing cholera symptoms and other pain. By the late 19th century or so, it was widely available in the US and Europe, and people were using it for all sorts of ailments. But then around the turn of the century, there was a shift in perception, and it was really fueled by xenophobia and misinformation, and that is what really led to prohibition. And despite this, modern research has validated cannabis's medical benefits, challenging long-standing prejudices. As we stand on the brink of change, with President Biden rumored to support moving cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a higher schedule, maybe Schedule 3 under the Controlled Substances Act, we're going to explore the journey from vilification of this plant to potential re-legalization and what that means for you as a small business owner or a large business owner or just an everyday person. Joining us today is Adam Goers, an expert in the field, and he's going to shed a little light on the significance of this moment in time. So stay tuned as we unravel the storied past and the hopeful future of cannabis in America. Adam is a big deal in the world of politics and cannabis. He sort of mixes it up in corporate affairs and political strategy, but he's got his hands in a little bit of everything. And I've got a lot of respect for how he shows up in our space. Behind the scenes, he used to work actually with Governor Martin O'Malley and has had a hand in Hillary Clinton's campaign. And now he's leading the way as a political strategist and an incredible leader in our sector as a senior vice president at Columbia Care for Government Affairs. We were first introduced, I think, by a mutual friend, Catherine, and we now serve on the board of the U.S. Cannabis Council together. And that's just one of the many boards he serves on in our space. Adam's got stories and insights you don't want to miss. So Adam, welcome to the Greenwall Kickback. Glad to have you.
Glad to be with you.
Yeah, so I'm going to give just a little bit about your background. You have had some pretty significant roles in corporate affairs across the sector. You've done political strategy work and fundraising. You worked for Martin O'Malley and Hillary Clinton, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and then you were the chair of the Democratic Governors Association for a little bit, and then you found your way into cannabis. How did that happen?
After business school, I was looking for something that was even more exciting than politics that I had left behind, and I found it.
Okay, well, I think both can be exciting and a bit of a shit show at times, but I'm glad you're here with us now. So I came to meet you through a personal friend. That was Catherine, who I think first told me about you. And this was through the U.S. Cannabis Council. And you're an executive board member there, but you were also the chair of the board at the Cannabis Trade Federation for a while, correct?
That's right. Can't quit all these different organizations. And now I co-chair the Coalition for Cannabis Scheduling Reform that's advocating for the Biden administration to reclassify cannabis to Schedule 3 on our long path to legalization.
Long. Okay. So a lot of people don't understand sort of the history of rescheduling, descheduling. How did it become illegal in the first place? Because for more than 100 years in America, for sure, there has been, I think, knowledge of the fact that there was some medicinal benefit. But it wasn't until, the marijuana tax of 1937 that, cannabis was essentially banned nationwide. And then there was that film Reefer Madness. And then in the 1960s, laws started to really affect the everyday person. And then we ended up coming up with, here in America, the cannabis prohibition, which was through the Controlled Substances Act. So can you tell us a little bit about the Controlled Substance Act and what that means for everyday people?
And I'll connect it to what's happening right now too, which is that cannabis is scheduled as is classified as a Schedule 1 drug, which means that it has no medical utility and a high level of abuse. We all know that's nonsense, but it's been it was put in there by Congress during the late 1960s, early 70s. And it's next to heroin, things like that. We all know that cannabis has medical utility, which is why in this recent release from the FDA and HHS that they acknowledge that gives the ability for cannabis to move to be Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5. A lot of people would smartly ask, well, why is cannabis scheduled at all? Because alcohol and tobacco, many of which we know are so much more harmful than cannabis. Why aren't they on there? Why can't cannabis come off of that? It's because Congress is the only one that can do that. And so this reclassification effort that the Biden administration is doing is as much as the administration can do. And so HHS and FDA recommended Schedule 3 that gets us out of Schedule 1. And we're hopeful that the DEA is going to announce a proposed rule soon that will get us there.
So tell me a little bit, for lay people, Adam, what does it mean to be in Schedule 3 versus Schedule 1?
Well, broadly speaking, it means that cannabis has medical utility. And so that's what gets you out of Schedule 1. And then Schedule 3 is a measure of how much abuse potential there is. And what does it mean practically? It doesn't make it a pharmaceutical drug to be a Schedule 3. Pharma can already bring a drug, just like they did with Epidiolex, through the trial. So for those that think that reclassifying cannabis is going to be some boon to pharma's already had the path before, and it would make no difference now. What it will do, though, is it will get rid of 280E taxation, because by law, 280E only applies to substances that are classified as Schedule 1 or as Schedule 2. So I like to point out that ketamine, for instance, is a Schedule 3 drug. I don't know a lot of necessarily illicit ketamine dealers that are trading on the New York Stock Exchange, but I do know one thing: they don't pay 280E. And that's what this industry is going to be the beneficiary. This is the most that this administrative process can get us to, because who can say that cannabis doesn't have any abuse potential? It's why we have responsible consumption. It's why we do 21 and up. We still need to go after this progress to fully legalize cannabis through Congress and get them to deschedule cannabis. But I think for those that are saying that this isn't enough, I agree. Schedule 3 is not enough, but it's a step on the road to full legalization. And in the process, it's going to remove 280E, which is the reason why companies big and small, social equity and otherwise, are having a hard time keeping their head above water right now. So I want to applaud HHS and FDA for following the science. Finally, for the first time, recognizing formally that cannabis has medical utility, and for hopefully seeing this process through in the coming months to finalize this Schedule 3 classification. So businesses can deduct their common and ordinary business expenses, and we can get to work on the next step, which is fully legalizing cannabis through Congress.
You mentioned a little bit about research, and medical utility, and whether or not it's a substance that has addictive properties to it. Tell me a little bit about Schedule 3 and how it affects research.
Sure. It generally speaking, this just classification and acknowledgement that it has medical utility, we think is going to open new doors. It's going to make doctors less hesitant to recommend cannabis to patients. It's going to open up the floodgates of research and people that are trying to add into the body of work that has allowed for this classification change. Admittedly, Schedule 3 in and of itself is not going to open up kind of lessen regulatory barriers to it, unfortunately. And that's from a ill thought of medical cannabis research bill that passed about 15 months ago that we were not supportive of, because we thought it was going to handcuff medical research. So that's the unfortunate piece of this. But I'd be negligent to say that there aren't some benefits that are going to come about from this. They're just going to be smaller than, frankly, what would have happened under this reclassification had that bill not passed a year and a half ago.
That's right. Tell me, what would you want to say to small business owners? Because I think there are a number of small business owners across the nation that are in this space and are in particularly plant touching
Yeah.
positions. How does Schedule 3 reschedule affect them specifically?
Well, this is a key message. I think one consideration is that everybody in the cannabis industry sometimes just can't believe that anything good could happen to us.
Right.
And let's be clear, Schedule 3 is a really great thing
Mhm.
for cannabis businesses, particularly those smaller businesses that are not vertically integrated. One, not much of a secret is that those that are vertically integrated have been able to mitigate some of their 280E taxation
Sure.
by putting expenses at different parts of the vertical part of their business. But if you're running a dispensary or you're just running a delivery business, you have
You're
nowhere to
getting you're
hide, quote
getting
unquote,
hammered.
those expenses. You're getting
That's right.
hammered.
Right,
And
right.
so for those that have thought either one, as we've talked before, that this is a giveaway to pharma, it's not at all. Pharma has no easier access to the cannabis market under Schedule 3 than they do Schedule 1. But also some of those same folks have said this is a giveaway to big companies. It's going to help. It's going to be good for big cannabis companies. But you know what it's going to be great for? It's going to be great for small businesses in the cannabis space because they're the ones that have been disproportionately getting hit by 280E the most.
Yep. And tell me, so let's say, the FDA and HHS's recommendation is received well, and DEA says, we agree with you guys, which historically has been the case. There has
That's
been
right.
no circumstance in which the DEA has issued a ruling that was different than the recommendation. What are the next steps in the process?
Yeah. It's a comment period that will open up. Let's say that and we expect within the next month or two that we're going to see a proposed rule out of DEA. It will open a comment period. Organization that I help lead, the Coalition for Cannabis Scheduling Reform, is working with physicians, veterans groups, social equity groups, the like, to put forward a detailed comment in support of that move. The DEA will then potentially do some hearings on it and review all those comments before implementing their final rule that would follow somewhere between, say, 3 to 5 months following this announcement. I'll say this, that very rarely does a proposed rule change by the time it gets to a final rule. It might change on the margins and
Right.
some of the pieces around it, but we do expect that once that draft rule is announced, we hope within the next month or two that it's going to be a final rule before too long. And then once that final rule is implemented, we're going to be in a position where companies are not paying 280E. That's the big takeaway here.
So accountants, and I think probably some of our bankers and certainly business people are looking at this very carefully. If we had a crystal ball and we were forecasting for them when they could expect to have 280E eliminated
Yeah.
as a burden, as a tax burden, what would be your guesstimation?
I'm saying before the end of the year. And
Okay,
then
so
the trick is going to be, when is that effective? Is it going to be effective on a quarterly basis? Is it going to be effective for the whole tax year? That's where the accountants and the lawyers will get
right.
in. And I would suggest that people need not worry about that there are smart accountants and lawyers working on that for the industry's sake, right? Nothing that one company is going to get anything more favorable than the rest.
Yep.
So be confident that there are smart folks that are working on that. And I do expect that the 2024 tax return is going to look very, very, very different than what years before.
Yeah, thank God. Tell us, I think before we go, where would you suggest a small to mid-sized business go to get more information about rescheduling and what it could mean for them?
The Coalition for Cannabis Scheduling Reform
Yep.
is the place for that. And I would also, suggest that, there are a number of good trade organizations that folks should be a part of, whether it's Attach, the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp, or whether it's the USCC, both of which are working in partnership with the Coalition for Cannabis Scheduling Reform. That website is schedulingreform.org. You can see a lot of very detailed memos from very smart folks that know this even better than I that can provide you even more detail.
All right, quick take. If you had 3 things to say to people about rescheduling, what would it be?
All it does, number one, what it does is it gets rid of 280E. Number two is it gets rid of 280E. And three is that it's a good step in the road on our way to full federal legalization.
All right. Thanks a lot, Adam, for your time. I hope you have an awesome day, and we look forward to the next Greenwall Kickback.
Thanks.